Whoosh! With the sound of the wind, Shaw slammed his foot on the edge of his skateboard, launching it into the air and catching it in his arms. At that moment, the sun was hanging high up in the sky, shining radiantly, and the morning glow was as bright as fire. In stark contrast to the sunny morning, the long corridor in front of him was so dark that he could barely see the end. Carrying the skateboard, Shaw paused at the door briefly and then strode into the corridor. After several twists and turns, he came upon a door. Shaw pushed the door casually with his fingers. Dazzling light flooded out into the corridor. Shaw approached the dazzling light, leaned lazily against the wall, and removed the dragonfly eye from his chest. Lowering his eyes, he focused his gaze on the dragonfly eye of the Warring States period in his palm. The round bead remained warm, and the sophisticated patterns, beautiful colors, and blue-violet glow were as brilliant as ever. After a while, Shaw stood before the light, the cynicism in his eyes slowly fading. It's time to archive. As he stretched out his arm, a lively face suddenly appeared. A chance to meet again. Thinking about the girl who disparaged him and yet expected so much from him, Shaw had mixed feelings. The corners of his mouth sank imperceptibly. In fact, back on the roof terrace earlier that morning, there was something left unsaid. The world was on the brink of collapse. If the archive was completed successfully, when would their next meeting be? And what would it be like?
Thinking about it, I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Though he said he's looking forward to it, no joy could be seen in Shaw's eyes. In his clear, bright pupils, a touch of emotion settled at the bottom. The next moment, Shaw raised his eyebrows slightly and held the dragonfly eye with his fingers. The warmth had already dissipated, and the intrinsic coolness of the glaze seeped into his palm. He closed his narrow eyes, and when he opened them again, he suddenly turned and walked out the door. Before archiving, he had a sudden urge to see the world again. The sun was much brighter and hotter than it was in the early morning, and blazing light now filled the entire city. Shaw walked to a hidden creek, on the bank of which there happened to be a row of tall city walls. He jumped up on the wall and sat down with one leg dangling over the side. He raised his head and gazed at the distant city through the low bushes in front of him. From this height, the scenery within a radius of a few miles was reflected in Shaw's eyes. In Loveland City, the sky was gray, and the weather remained sultry, the same as any other day. However, eternal night was about to descend. Shaw looked away and lowered his head. Although he wanted to see the city again, he was obviously not in the mood. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him, and he began rummaging through his bag. He took out a ballpoint pen, which had a pink, smiling rabbit doll on top.
All right, she really likes this thing, which is concerning.
He sneered, and yet the corners of his lips rose unconsciously.
Forget it. Despite her poor taste, she's still pretty reliable.
Shaw flicked the rabbit that seemed to be laughing stupidly. There was a rare seriousness in his tone.
I'm counting on you. Don't let me down.
After one last look at the city, Shaw put away the pen and deftly jumped off the wall. The mottled sunlight fell on Shaw's face through the gaps in the branches and leaves. Due to the strong rays, some fleeting emotions in his eyes seemed somewhat unreal. He was obviously reluctant, but his pursed lips indicated that he had made a decision.
All right, no need to be nostalgic.
He shrugged as if he didn't care.
I really have to work this time. The last thing I want to do is fall behind that coward.
All the emotions finally revealed themselves in a smile.
It's so damn hot.
Muttering to himself, Shaw strode through the door without looking back. It wasn't long before he stood in front of the light once again. He took out the dragonfly eye, and this time stretched out his hand without hesitation. Shaw looked at the dragonfly eye in shock. He couldn't believe what had happened. The archive had failed. Was it possible that this world just couldn't be archived?
So lame.
Shaw combed his hair in irritation, and his eyes narrowed into an impatient arc. Unresolved doubts began to surface, along with all the other complex emotions. As he said when he bid farewell to her that morning, archiving the world was something he had been doing the whole time. Every world had its meaning and value. When a world was at its end, everything that had taken place in it was doomed to vanish as well. For better or worse, its history and the truth of its destruction were worthy of being understood and studied by future generations. Therefore, there must be someone who does the job, archiving the world to keep the truth. Obviously, Shaw was the one chosen to complete such a mission. But now the mission somehow failed. Shaw had never in his life known the meaning of failure.
Has this world collapsed so hard that it can't even be archived?
Standing before the light, he frowned, lost in thought. This was the first time he had encountered a situation where the world could not be archived. Different worlds had been destroyed for various reasons, but he had preserved all their truths before the worlds were destroyed. Then, what did this failure mean? Could it be... A possibility emerged in Shaw's mind, and his narrowed eyes suddenly lit up.
Unless... she can really do it.
Once the seeds of speculation had been planted, Shaw became even more convinced. With this thought in mind, he took out the dragonfly eye for one last try. But the result remained the same. Hanging the dragonfly eye back on his chest, Shaw raised his eyebrows and looked to the light with a meaningful smile.
And there is only one possibility left. I don't believe in failure without reason.
Shaw slung his backpack neatly on his shoulder, seemingly in a good mood. He took a look around the place once more and then walked away without looking back. Shaw casually kicked open the door of the antique store. The moment he entered, he noticed an unfamiliar smell.
Oh, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you all afternoon.
It was an old man with long braids who behaved like a bratty child, yet wore a uniform-like suit, making him look all the more bizarre.
Want some water?
The moment he said it, the old man seemed to recall something.
I almost forgot that you don't like water. There's soda over there. Help yourself.
Shaw looked up and almost burst out laughing.
What, do you think this is your place? Sure, make yourself at home.
The old man smiled and waved his hand.
Why bother with yours and mine? Since your boss gave me the key, I come here often. So it's basically like my place.
Shaw snorted unceremoniously.
Just because my boss gave you the key doesn't mean you can break into private property.
The old man remained unfazed.
Look, boy, I'm here to help you. Did you fail to archive the world today?
Shaw did not immediately respond to the old man. He went straight past him, grabbed a bottle of soda from the corner and took several gulps. Newly refreshed, Shaw glanced up at the old man.
Who says I need your help? It's nothing. I could figure it out myself.
Seeing that the old man was still smiling, Shaw raised his brows and continued.
But since you're already here, feel free to enlighten me if you have something to say.
The old man shook his head.
Kid, you've really got a bad temper. But despite that, you've done a pretty good job of completing the mission.
Shaw snorted softly at the old man's compliment.
How does it feel to face defeat for the first time in your life?
Shaw looked the old man up and down. The advent of eternal night and fear of an unknown future had left many people in a state of panic. But looking at the old man, his hair was neatly tied up, his clothes were properly pressed, and even that cheerful look on his face. In other words, he didn't seem to be anxious at all. Shaw secretly smiled, realizing that his speculation must be correct.
I feel nothing. It's definitely not my problem anyway.
Shaw snorted, with an indifferent look on his face. The old man smiled again.
Why are you so confident? But then, there's nothing wrong with that.
He stroked his non-existent beard, looking mysterious.
As for archiving, when the time is right, it can be done. The reason you failed is simply that it has not yet reached the point at which this world can be archived.
Shaw drank a few more gulps of soda. He raised his eyes to stare at the old man and pretended to listen carefully.
Take, for example, the game you often play. You can only save the game progress at specific points designated by the system, right?
Shaw smirked.
I didn't expect someone like you to know so much.
The old man replied triumphantly.
Of course. Despite my age, I'm always up for trying new things.
After taking a moment to gloat, he got back on topic.
So, today's failure is only because this world has not yet reached the point at which it is to be destroyed.
Hearing what the old man had to say, Shaw seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but still wore a mocking expression on his face. He snorted.
Oh yeah? I figured that out a long time ago.
Sure enough, as he had surmised at the archive point, his failure was a testament to something that was about to happen. The girl who said, "Good luck to us both," a few hours prior, was really lucky. Looking up, his eyes were met with the old man's expectant gaze, and the corners of his mouth immediately sank.
Are you finished?
The old man nodded with a smile, and Shaw raised his eyebrows.
Then you can go now.
As he spoke, he walked to the door and opened it.
Of all your babble, only one thing was useful.
After the old man left, Shaw looked at the empty antique store with a smile on his face. Outside the window, the dusk sky had transformed into a golden red. The setting sun hung low to the west, and it wasn't long before the evening glow illuminated the land. Shaw leaned lazily by the window, absent-mindedly drinking soda.
You're not so useless after all. It seems that you haven't wasted the Queen's gene.
He raised his head and gazed at the burning red clouds outside the window. He had a look of indifference, but his mouth was curled up into a smile.
It's not entirely unexpected.
No one knew how she would succeed, but since the world would remain the same, then she was.
Kind of oblivious, but still fun to be around.
Just as the playfulness in his eyes intensified, a doubt that he had deliberately avoided before flashed through his mind. Her success would not come as easily as winning a prize. What was the price behind her success, and how would it impact the world? It was unfortunate that he couldn't predict the future. The only thing he was certain of was that since the world would not be destroyed, everything would continue on, and he would have to fulfill his promise.
Next time we meet, I won't be late.
Thinking of the promise he made to her that morning, Shaw scratched his head in irritation.
Why did I promise her?
As he spoke, he shook the empty soda can and casually tossed it into the trash. Watching the parabola, he uttered a light "Tch."
But now, I'm curious.
Shaw put one hand in his pocket and smiled. The expression in his eyes revealed that he was really looking forward to their next meeting. The sun gradually set to the west as the evening glow dissipated. Shaw subconsciously touched the dragonfly eye on his chest, and the coolness of the glaze immediately passed into his palm. He lowered his head slightly to look at the round bead that had been with him for a long time. The afterglow pouring in from the window easily penetrated the surface of the dragonfly eye's complex patterns, setting it aglow in blue-violet brilliance. Shaw raised the dragonfly eye and examined it. The blue-violet glow was crystal clear, as if it could suck him in at any moment. A bold idea suddenly struck him. He took a breath and half squinted his eyes, as if pondering over the feasibility of the idea. Time ticked by, Shaw became serious and put the dragonfly eye on his forehead. The moment he felt the energy envelop him, a word passed through his lips.
Save.
He clearly saw himself reflected on the surface of the delicate bead. Twilight was about to descend upon the city, but outside the window, the sun that had already set on the horizon suddenly rose from the west. The clouds floated backwards, the sparrows flew upside down, and the river surged upstream. Time was moving backwards at an incredible speed.